Across major airports in the United States, large-scale deportation flights are now underway. Thousands of people with final removal orders are being boarded onto planes under stepped-up ICE enforcement. This is not a routine operation. It's a nationwide push. From Texas to Florida, New York to Arizona, chartered aircraft are departing day and night, carrying individuals ordered to leave the country. In this video, we'll look at the scale of these deportations, how many flights are operating each week, and the rising political and public debate surrounding this surge. And if you want to stay informed on every major update as these operations unfold, make sure to subscribe and follow our channel closely. Let's dive in. Over the last several days, ICE has stepped up its enforcement efforts dramatically, with reports indicating that more than 2,000 individuals have been placed on deportation flights in just a matter of days. This isn't a slow trickle of removals. It resembles a sustained, high-volume campaign. Based on flight tracking data, DHS briefings, and media coverage, analysts estimate that deportations are currently averaging close to 1,500 individuals per day. At that pace, the total could approach nearly 10,000 removals in a single week, well above the levels seen in recent years. Officials have stressed that the operations show no immediate sign of slowing down. The logistics behind this surge are equally striking. ICE Air Operations has carried out close to 1,000 charter flights since the start of the administration, roughly a 15% increase compared with the same period last year, according to government data and independent tallies. These are not commercial flights, but specially arranged repatriation missions with planes designated exclusively to carry detainees back to their countries of origin. On some days, multiple flights are reported departing back-to-back, underscoring both the scale and urgency of the current push. The flights themselves are concentrated through several established departure hubs. Miami, Florida, continues to be one of the busiest gateways, while Alexandria, Louisiana, has long served as a central point for ICE charter operations. In Texas, facilities in San Antonio and Brownsville see frequent departures, given the state's position as the nation's largest detention hub. Additional flights are also departing from California and Arizona, which continue to process high numbers of detainees. Detention population figures help explain this concentration. Texas currently holds more than 13,000 detainees. Louisiana nearly 7,400, California around 3,500, and Arizona roughly 2,600. To put this into perspective, ICE historically averaged about 29 repatriation flights per week. That baseline has now been exceeded, with some recent weeks reportedly doubling or even tripling that number depending on operational demands. Compared with prior years, the sheer volume of flights now underway reflects a sharp escalation. Officials describe the surge as part of a nationwide strategy to clear backlogs of final deportation orders, but for communities on the ground and families caught up in the process, the effects are being felt in real time. In the past few days, ICE has announced a series of enforcement actions across the United States, underscoring its ongoing efforts to carry out removals ordered by immigration judges. In Laredo, Texas, officers with ICE Harlingen arrested Luis Gerardo Mozo Bazin, who has since been deported following his removal order. In Arizona, the ICE Phoenix Special Response Team, working in coordination with international partners, successfully removed Julio Cesar Chavez on August 18, 2025, while officials reaffirmed their commitment to prioritizing public safety. In Austin, Texas, 19-year-old Nideli Padilla Rivera of Honduras was taken into ICE custody and now awaits removal proceedings. Meanwhile, ICE also confirmed that Eric Martin Mejia Moncada, a Nicaraguan national previously deported in 2020, had re-entered the United States unlawfully and was once again apprehended and placed in custody. These are just a few of the individuals arrested and now facing deportation as ICE continues its nationwide enforcement operations. This comes amid a recent surge in ICE operations across the country, with federal officials noting a marked increase in targeted arrests and removals. According to ICE, the stepped-up actions are part of a broader push to enforce immigration laws more aggressively, with both fugitive apprehension teams and international coordination playing a central role. The surge has led to more flights being scheduled, more removals being processed, and a growing number of non-citizens facing detention and deportation proceedings. Officials say this momentum is expected to continue in the coming weeks. Alongside the policy announcements, the numbers tell their own story. Earlier this year, the administration requested nearly $25 billion for border and immigration enforcement in its federal budget proposal, with over $4 billion specifically earmarked for ICE operations. A significant share of that funding has been directed toward ICE Air Operations, the division that handles deportation flights. According to official DHS figures, ICE currently spends an estimated $15,000 to $20,000 per deportation flight, depending on distance and logistical costs. With the latest surge, some weeks have seen as many as 20 to 25 removal flights departing from U.S. airports, pushing operational expenses into the tens of millions of dollars per month. In fact, ICE has already received emergency supplemental funding from Congress, allowing the agency to expand contracts with private charter companies like Swift Air and Omni Air International, the same carriers often used for large-scale deportations. Officials argue this spending is justified, noting that every dollar goes toward reducing overcrowding in detention centers and accelerating removals for individuals with final deportation orders. Beyond the funding and flight operations, the White House has also been emphasizing the broader strategic goals behind these moves. Officials say the deportation surge is not just about numbers. It's about restoring deterrence and reasserting control over the immigration system. By rapidly removing individuals with final orders of removal, the administration believes it can send a clear message to both migrants currently in the U.S. unlawfully and to those considering crossing the border. Another dimension of the policy is international cooperation. The U.S. has recently finalized agreements with countries like Mexico, Honduras, and El Salvador to streamline repatriation procedures. These deals allow deportation flights to be scheduled more frequently and with fewer diplomatic delays, ensuring that ICE operations can run at maximum capacity. The administration has also tied deportation policy to domestic priorities. Officials argue that stepped-up removals free up detention space for high-priority cases, reduce strain on Border Patrol facilities, and ultimately lower the burden on local communities dealing with overcrowded shelters. While ICE has accelerated its operations, the deportation surge has not gone unchallenged in the courts. Several advocacy groups have filed lawsuits, arguing that the mass removals risk violating due process protections. One key point raised is that many migrants may not have had full access to legal counsel or sufficient time to present asylum claims before being placed on flights. Federal courts have already been asked to review whether the administration's fast-tracked removal proceedings align with constitutional protections and international obligations. Some judges have temporarily halted deportations for specific individuals, particularly when credible fear of persecution has been raised. At the same time, states like Texas and Florida have backed the federal government, filing briefs in support of tougher enforcement. This ongoing legal tug-of-war means that even as flights continue, the broader policy could still face restrictions or modifications depending on future rulings. The mass deportations in the United States are now reverberating far beyond American borders, becoming a serious issue in international diplomacy. Neighboring countries like Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador are under mounting pressure as thousands of deportees arrive each week. Officials in these nations argue that they simply do not have the infrastructure to absorb such a rapid influx. Local economies are already strained, social services are underfunded, and reintegration programs for returnees are limited. This has led to tense back-channel negotiations between Washington and Central American governments, with U.S. officials offering financial aid packages and security assistance to ease the burden. In Europe, the situation is being closely monitored. Several EU nations facing their own migrant crises see America's hardline approach as both a warning and a political model. Countries such as Italy and Germany, where migration debates are fueling protests and reshaping elections, have started citing U.S. actions in their domestic debates. Some praising the decisiveness, others warning that it undermines human rights commitments. The European Union has also raised quiet concerns about how these deportations might affect transatlantic relations, especially in areas like trade and joint security cooperation. The United Nations and international NGOs have taken a sharper stance. Agencies tied to refugee protection and human rights have urged Washington to uphold its obligations under international law, warning that rapid deportations risk violating asylum protocols. Statements from UNHCR and Amnesty International stress that, while every country has a right to secure its borders, policies must not ignore humanitarian protections for vulnerable groups, including women and children. At the same time, some governments have cautiously welcomed the U.S. crackdown. Officials from countries in West Africa and South Asia, where smuggling networks often route migrants through dangerous, exploitative pathways, argue that tougher U.S. enforcement could discourage irregular migration and weaken criminal gangs. These governments are quietly cooperating with Washington on repatriation agreements, even as domestic critics accuse them of bowing to U.S. pressure. Overall, the deportations are no longer just a U.S. domestic policy issue. They are reshaping alliances, straining diplomatic ties, and forcing a new global conversation on how nations balance border security with humanitarian responsibility. Analysts say this could become a defining theme in future international summits, trade talks, and security forums, showing how deeply intertwined migration is with global politics. The deportation surge has quickly become a flashpoint in Washington. Supporters of the policy, mostly within the Republican camp, argue that the administration is finally taking long overdue steps to restore order at the border. They highlight the record number of removals as proof that federal agencies are capable of delivering results when properly funded and directed. Some lawmakers have even called for expanding the operation further, urging that more resources be shifted into detention capacity and flight logistics. Democrats, however, are divided. Moderates in border states, under pressure from rising migration numbers in their districts, have cautiously welcomed the tougher stance, framing it as a necessary but temporary measure. Progressives, on the other hand, have sharply criticized the administration, accusing it of abandoning humanitarian commitments and escalating deportations at the expense of asylum protections. Several members of Congress have warned that mass removals risk alienating immigrant communities whose support could prove pivotal in upcoming elections. Outside Capitol Hill, advocacy groups, faith leaders, and city officials have also weighed in. While some mayors in overwhelmed municipalities support the federal crackdown as a way to relieve pressure on local shelters and services, immigrant rights organizations have denounced the campaign as both costly and cruel. Public reaction to the recent surge in deportation flights is sharply polarized, reflecting both political divisions and community-level impacts. National surveys, including recent Pew Research and Gallup polling, indicate that 55 to 60% of Americans support stronger enforcement measures, including deportations of undocumented migrants, with many citing concerns about border security, crime, and strain on public services. This support is especially strong among Republican voters, where backing often exceeds 80%, while among Democrats, only about 30 to 35% favor large-scale removals, with independents falling in between. On the other hand, 35 to 40% of the public opposes mass deportations, pointing to humanitarian issues such as family separations, the targeting of long-term residents, and the treatment of asylum seekers. This divide plays out visibly on the streets. In some cities, local residents and advocacy groups have staged protests against ICE flights, accusing the government of cruelty and racial profiling, while in other communities, particularly those facing visible strains from recent migrant arrivals, rallies in support of tougher enforcement have drawn strong turnout. Media coverage has amplified this divide, with conservative outlets framing the flights as overdue enforcement of the law, while progressive voices highlight individual stories of deported families and question the morality and long-term effectiveness of the approach. Ultimately, public sentiment remains closely tied to broader debates over immigration reform, with support for deportations rising sharply during periods of migrant surges and declining when humanitarian concerns dominate the headlines. Deportations are set to intensify in the coming months, with expanded flights, new funding, and ongoing legal battles shaping how far the policy goes. Political divides are deepening, public opinion remains split, and international cooperation with receiving countries will play a key role in what happens next. What do you think about the surge in deportations? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this update useful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button so you never miss the latest updates. Thanks for watching.